Okay, I think we're ready. Welcome everyone to the NDA SME Mentor Scheme webinar. So this afternoon our presenters are myself, Sam Dancy, NDA Supply Chain Manager, Pippa Kelly, who is your key contact for the Mentor Scheme. We've got Sarah Lodge and Tim Kemp from Beehive. Sarah and Tim will go through the main presentation for this afternoon about what is the Mentor Scheme and what to think about on the scheme. I'll give you a brief update of the overall scheme. So I'll just hand over to Tim and he'll explain to you how the webinar is going to work this afternoon.
There's optimism. Yes, it's going to work. There's a whole load of things. I don't know how many of you are familiar with webinars generally, but there's a couple of things that are quite useful. Welcome, first of all. I'm hoping that, let me just get rid of that sound for a second. There we are. I hope that's a little clearer. We have background noise occasionally, which is a little bit frustrating, but I hope that you can you have a sense of what the webinar is like. It's going to be about an hour long. There's going to be a couple of presentations from Sam and Pippa and Sarah, a couple of polls, and we'll talk you through that process. There'll be you have the opportunity to speak, so if you want to raise a hand, then that's great. I noticed that Chris has just done that. I will, when I've finished talking, I will try and deal with some of those questions and concerns in a minute. So what I'd like to do now is just familiarize you with the screen. Hopefully you recognize what's going on. You've got some buttons you can play with. It's a raised hand issue. And we're going to try and give time for, as I said, time for questions at the end. As I say, I will try and deal with any concerns. If you've got any questions or there are any things that are bothering you, use the chat facility and then I'll see if I can deal with that while others are presenting. Okay, so I'm now going to hand over to Sarah and we shall begin.
We were an SME mentee in 2014. So this presentation has been put together partly on the basis of best practice in mentoring and partly on the basis of what was helpful to myself and the company in terms of being an SME mentee on the Mentor scheme. Next slide, please, Tim. So the structure of the webinar is very simple. There are going to be three parts. The first one is about this scheme from the perspective of the Nuclear Decommissioning Authority, and then a little bit of exploration around what mentoring is, some key skills and some models that you might find helpful. And the last part is how to get the most from the scheme itself. So how to address that difficult first session and then get the benefits of the scheme. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand over to Sam Dancy and she's going to take you through part one about the scheme.
Hey, thank you, Sarah. Really, I want to start off with just setting the scene. The supply chain is really important to the NDA to help us meet our mission. Last year we spent about 1.7 million in the supply chain by the SLCs who are delivering the projects. So SMEs are important to us in the supply chain because we see it providing innovation, flexibility and value for money. So out of that 1.6 billion we spent last year, 23% was spent with SMEs. That's direct and indirect with our larger tier 2 companies. And by 2020 we have a target of 31% spend with SMEs. And that's something that we're really trying to aim for. So the Mentor scheme is one of a series of actions we have in our SME action plan. And it's to try and support SMEs either already in the estate to expand business, look at other opportunities, or SMEs who are interested in finding more about nuclear and nuclear decommissioning. So the purpose of the scheme really is just to try and develop that mutual understanding and give an opportunity and benefit for both large and small firms within the NDA estate. Mentors can be from our larger tier 2s and they show their support for our SME action plan by supporting the scheme, but also we have some very experienced SME mentors as well who have been in the industry for a long time and really can give the benefit of their experience. And it's looking to sort of upskill individuals from SMEs just to help SME companies develop as they go along. And we know that it is very hard to enter our NDA estate. We are always looking to continue to try and improve how we can help get visibility of those opportunities, try and reduce barriers and things like that. And the mentors can help with some of those issues in just understanding how the NDA estate operates. And really, it may be that it will help you to be more effective in entering the NDA supply chain, but you may find that actually, now you've had a look at it, perhaps the NDA estate, nuclear decommissioning isn't for your business. And that's an okay result too. Next slide. Oh, we've got approach. Thanks, Tim. So we've been doing this for a few years now. We had our initial pilot, and that was followed by a second cohort last year. So we host and sponsor the programme, but it's very much supported by industry. We can't do it without the support of the mentors and also the interest from the mentees. And really, it's very much designed for SMEs. All the mentees are SMEs. As I said, mentors can come from any size of company. And we do the pairing on a very simple application process, which you will know from filling in the forms. We move on to the next one, Tim. The commitment. The initial pilot was for 12 months, but we found that it can take time to get those relationships built. So we've said really it's a 12 to 24 month program. You may find you need less time, you may find you need more time. It can take a little while to get dates in the diaries with your mentors, because everyone's busy. So we have great support from Beehive Coaching with Sarah and Tim, and also Mark's in the background who will be giving some training to our mentors on Friday. Very important thing is that we have a ground rule sheet, and that's really to set out the objectives of where you want to go with your mentor, and Sarah will cover that later. It's a minimum time commitment. There are no hard and fast rules on this. It's what you want to make of it. But just to give some outline, we say, a couple of hours per month. Ideally, first meeting to be face-to-face, but I know a lot of people will do it maybe by Skyping or on the telephone. And it's all about, it's volunteering, so companies bear their own costs. And what it's not a cosy relationship, and it's not a quick way to a contract, although it has helped some SMEs find more opportunities. And it's not just a tick box. We are very committed to it. This is our third cohort. Even if one SME gets benefit from it, gets benefit from the scheme, then we think that's a good thing. We don't mandate it. It's very much a volunteer exercise, and it shouldn't be the big companies telling you guys what to do. You're the experts for your business, but it's just giving you that support to understand our industry more. It's also not getting an unfair advantage. Yes, we are very keen to support SMEs and we know the value you can bring, but equally it has to be bringing value, and it's not about using SMEs for the sake of SMEs or reaching our target. So the mentors, as I said, they're volunteers. They are, when they're being mentors, they're representatives of the NDA scheme, so they should be putting their company hat aside and just being fairly neutral in terms of the scheme. Definitely from a range of organisations. We've got them pretty much across the country this time. They have a lot of experience and they're really looking to give something back. There's been quite a few of them have been in the industry for 10, 15, 20 years, maybe longer. And they know it's very important to support companies, get new blood into the supply chain, support the ones already working in the supply chain so that we all can do better and meet the NDA mission. And they really do want to help and contribute. And they also, it's very much a partnership thing, and they want to learn and develop too. So matching mentors and mentees, it's not a perfect science. is we try and base it on geography, looking at your applications and the particular areas that you were interested in for support, and then trying to match it up to where the mentor is and also what his key skills are as well. I think there is also a possibility, I think Pippa's let you know, that you may not be matched this year, but we always do the best that we can, and we're always on the hunt for more mentors. From previous mentees, I think they have got benefit. It's very much, you need to make those connections with your mentor. You probably need to push a bit, say, can we meet, because as I said, everyone's busy. But it has helped some of our SMEs understand the business more, understand who to go and talk to in terms of further opportunities, and also some of those business applications, thinking about planning, future planning, some of the sort of like maybe marketing activities and things like that. So that we have seen some really good results from previous schemes. Can we just move on to the next slide? I think the thing that SMEs have found, and to be honest, it doesn't matter what size of company, is that things do take a long time in our market. It definitely takes time to break through. It's not something that's going to happen quickly, and it is, you know, it can be 12 to 24 months before starting a sort of like investigation in terms of opportunities to actually something materialising. We know that we need to help try and improve that, but that is the reality of working in the NDA estate. And as I said earlier, there were a couple of companies who said, yeah, okay, thanks for that. We've looked at the nuclear market and actually we've decided it's not for us. For some of the SMEs who have come into the market, we tend to find, they say that it has been really hard, particularly if you're perhaps in some of the engineering type activities where there's a lot of quality, inspection, paperwork and things like that. But we tend to find that the SME says that after going through that process, the company has been upskilled and it's easier for them to get more work in other industries that are also regulated. So just move on to the next slide. That's me done. So I am going to hand over, I think, to Sarah.
Well, what we're going to do now is demonstrate how we're going to use the instant feedback polls during the webinar, just to add a little bit of activity to the process, and on this one find out a bit more about your experience of mentoring. So I'm going to hand you back to Tim, who's going to set up the first poll.
Right, well, what we've got are a couple of buttons that will be available to you, and you should see them now. Just a simple question: have you ever been mentored? And this is a chance for you just to click on one of the three options, and I get a wonderful sense of how many people are voting. It's just as exciting as election night for me. And we're getting to, of course, those of you that are on phones won't be able to do this, sadly. And you won't also, but you will see the results. So I'm going to close the poll there. We have just about everybody, I think. And you should now see the results. So there we have it. We have a split. So it looks like about just over half of you have had some form of mentoring, some form or other, and half of you, a little less than half of you, haven't. So that's an example of how we can use the polls. So we'll go on to the next one, which is a little bit of a story, actually, about mentoring generally. I don't know how many of you, we were going to ask that you, in fact we were going to insist that you all read Homer's Odyssey before you undertook this program, but rather than force you to do that, we just thought we'd tell you a little bit of a story about where the whole notion of mentoring came from. Let me see, hopefully you can see a slide in front of you now. There, is that, yeah. Okay, you can see a slide with a picture of Mentor and Telemachus. This is a very, very simple little story. Odysseus was fighting in the Trojan War, leaves, and of course he leaves the care of his son in the hands of Telemachus, in the hands of Mentor, who is an old friend, an old trusted friend. This is where the notion of mentoring came from. Odysseus, as we know, got slightly distracted for 10 years or so, and his son went off to find him. At this point, Athena, those of you that remember, Athena, goddess of war and posters, I think, assumed the form of mentor and guided Telemachus on his journey. And that's where this whole notion of mentoring came from. It was somebody who had the wisdom to guide you on a journey. Now, I don't know how heroic the kind of mentoring you're going to be doing is, but that's where the notion came from. And we thought it was desperately important that you knew that. Of course, the other thing, of course, is that in history, there are loads of people who have had mentors. Socrates and Plato, and Beethoven had Haydn, and Jung had Freud, and Pooh had Piglet. You know, there's a whole load of them. It's an enormously valuable relationship, and you know, as those of you that have been mentored will know, hopefully it's proved its worth. So that's it. That's the historical bit. We shall now move on.
Okay, well, thanks, Tim, in terms of putting no pressure on the mentees in terms of emulating Aristotle and Plato, for example. To bring it down to more prosaic levels, mentoring nowadays in business tends to refer to something which is offline, so it's not line management support. It's support provided by one person to another, and the key thing here is it's a process of transitioning, so it's giving support during a process of transitioning. And next slide, Tim, please. And this is where, when we look at how mentoring is used, it's often when there's change or growth going on, or when people are new to an organization, but it's a way of passing knowledge on, and passing tacit knowledge on. So that's the knowledge that people don't get through formal training or learning and development, but they just get from being around for a long time. It's an opportunity for that tacit knowledge to be passed on. And the aim of mentoring nowadays is to maximize and fulfill the potential of the mentee. That's a bit of management speak, but there you go. One of the ways we thought it might be helpful for you to understand mentoring as opposed to other types of learning and development intervention was to put it in a little graph like this. So you can see across the top we're comparing training and coaching and mentoring and consultancy, and you can see that down the side we're comparing the aims, the focus, the objectives, what you're looking at during the process, and the kind of relationship that you're talking about. So you can see from that that mentoring is very much about career progression, less about individual performance in a specific role, much more about your long-term career and the direction of that. That the focus is that long-term potential again, that the objectives are set by you as mentee, and we'll look at that in a little bit more detail further down the presentation. And during that process, we're considering your long-term aims, your skills, the experience and the expectations, and the relationship. Now this is quite interesting because it's an SME mentoring program, so you're looking at the development of the whole business, but generally it's just one person working with the mentor. So you're combining the business side of things with the one-to-one mentoring relationship as well. So next slide, Tim. Because this is very much driven by you, by the mentee, then the responsibility for how the mentoring relationship moves on and what it focuses on rests to quite a large extent on you. So we're going to look at some of the key skills that you might need for being a mentee and getting the best you can out of the mentoring relationship. I don't know if any of you are familiar, if you've ever done any kind of coaching, training or anything like that, then you'll be familiar with the importance of listening, but also the different levels of listening. And these are described as not listening at all, being totally absent, being distracted, being selective, so that's listening to the kind of things that we want to hear rather than what's actually being said, and then the active listening, which is listening with intent and understanding. Now the active listening is quite important. Sam mentioned that getting mentoring sessions can be quite challenging in the midst of a busy working career, and also even if you're on a mentoring session, it's possible to be not perhaps, particularly if you're mentoring through Skype or on the telephone, that you may not be focusing entirely on what's going on. But it's really important for mentees to be really focused on the relationship at the time it's happening and to be really listening so that you can respond and take advantage of what your mentor is saying and what's possible for your mentor to offer you, really. I have no idea whether everybody's fully focused at the moment on the webinar, or if some of you are writing your shopping lists or making coffee or whatever, but that's kind of what we're talking about with the distraction, the selective and the active listening. Okay, thanks Tim. Another key skill for mentees with their mentors is the skill of both giving and receiving feedback. So because this is about you getting what you need from the mentoring relationship, then giving feedback to your mentor is a really important part of that process, because it may be that the mentor isn't giving you quite what you think you might need, or you may want to tell them what you've just done is really great, has been very helpful, and could I have some more of that please? So when we talk about giving feedback, one of the things we say is think about what you want as a result of giving the feedback. Are you wanting something to stop? Are you wanting something to start? Are you wanting it to be helpful to the other person? Or are you just wanting to vent frustrations? Because what you're wanting as a result will go a long way towards getting the result from the feedback. And then we talk about boosting feedback, which is making it behavioural, so about things that people are doing rather than who they are or what they are. So rather than saying you're being aggressive, you might say you're starting to raise your voice, for example, that it's observed, that it's owned, so you're not saying somebody else says this, but this is my experience, that you make it specific and it's done in a timely fashion. And when it comes to receiving feedback, if you want some feedback from your mentor, then ask for the feedback that you want, and then it gives you the opportunity then to evaluate it in terms of whether or not you think it's valid, and whether or not you think it's useful, and whether you should act on it. So that's a key skill, which is feedback. Next slide please, Tim. Thanks. And one of the most important skills for getting the most from the mentoring relationship is that of goal setting. So really thinking about what you want to achieve as a result of the mentoring. The reason we set goals for anything, never mind mentoring, is because having something to aim for provides some kind of motivation. It becomes aspirational rather than blundering around in the dark. It's also something that you can revisit, which helps you keep the process on track. It gives you some idea of whether the relationship or whether what's happening is successful. And generally, people who have got some idea of what they want to achieve, they tend to achieve more than those who aren't really clear what they're setting out with the intention of doing. If we look at the next slide, often goals are described in other terms like outcomes or activities and targets, but they're all describing the same thing, which is what do we want to achieve at the end of the activity. Many of you will be familiar with the concept of SMART goals, and this is a little bit like the boosted feedback in terms of setting goals that are specific, So rather than I'll set aside more time for my team, it might be I will have a team meeting on Monday morning for 15 minutes every week. That they're measurable, so they're something that you can estimate whether or not you've achieved them or not. And the next one is achievable, that they're realistic. You know, deciding that you want to become a multimillionaire on the basis of the NDA estate supply chain in the next year may not be realistic, but you may be able to take a step along that line. And time bound, so that you've got some idea of when you want to achieve whatever it is that you're achieving. And the last thing about goal setting that's really important is that they should always be phrased in the positive. So that's the next slide, Tim. So being positive, saying what you're going to do that's positive rather than saying what you're going to stop doing. So setting aside an hour each week rather than stopping filling week with meetings is much more positive, much more specific, and is much more likely to be achievable. Now, many of you will have come to the SME mentor scheme with different goals already, and I'm going to ask Tim to provide us with another poll, which is just taking a look at how many of you have entered the mentor scheme with these particular goals. Over to you, Tim.
Okay, there you go, folks. There's a poll asking you your reasons for getting involved. We've given you six choices. Just choose the one that most closely fits your own particular reason for getting involved. Okay, we're getting there. We've got about 3/4 of you voted so far. Okay, that's pretty much most of you. Yes, yeah, pretty much all of you. Okay, I'm going to stop it there and just share that with you, just to give you an idea of how you and some of your colleagues will have voted. Hopefully you can see that. It looks like a large chunk of you wanted to get a better understanding of the nuclear sector of the market, of what's going on in terms of growing your own businesses, which is understandable. There's also chunks of you that wanted support for tendering, or with tendering, the invitation to tenders and the PQQs and so on, as well as some interest in marketing and communications generally. And not so much around the technical qualifications. Okay, thank you very much for that. We'll move on.
Okay. So what we're going to move on to now is, as I mentioned before, this scheme, it's the SME mentoring scheme, so it's the business mentoring scheme, but generally there are named individuals who will be meeting with the mentor. So the mentor isn't going in a consultancy role, it tends to be more that there are one-to-one meetings between the mentor and an individual from the SME. And just thinking in terms of people who are going to be the ones actually meeting face-to-face with the mentors. In terms of career stages, individual career stages, this is a helpful model to think in terms of how mentoring can support people as an individual within their organization and also within their own personal careers. Peter Hawkins came up with this model of career stages, and he described 4 stages. 1, experimentation, 2, experience accumulation, 3, full leadership, and 4, eldership. And in the next 4 slides, we're just going to take a look at each one of those in turn and talk a little bit more about them, because we're going to have a poll at the end of this just to see where people think they are in terms of their own personal career. So the experimentation stage is where people are looking at trying out lots of different careers or lots of different jobs. So they may move very quickly from job to job, from career to career. They may try lots of different types of businesses and sectors. The whole phase here is about looking for discovery. It's about trying to find a fit either within a job or within a business or within a sector. And this is generally associated with the early stages of somebody's career, although if you're trying a new career, then you can go right back to this experimentation stage again. So this is really trying to find your best fit across a broad range of potential careers. The next stage is experience accumulation. And this is where you finish the experimentation and you found yourself a bit of a career or a bit of a niche that you think suits you quite well. And at this point, what you're trying to do is get as much experience as possible in that particular career. So you've gone from a breadth to looking at depth. So depth of understanding, experimentation, but within the bounds of your particular sector or your particular job role or your particular profession. And it's really about establishing that solid foundation and making a name for yourself within your sector or within your profession. And this tends to be associated more with early midlife. The third stage is full leadership. And this is where you've established your own body of knowledge and your experience. And this is very much about you thinking how you want to do things personally and what kind of legacy you want to leave in your particular field or profession. As with all definitions or descriptions of leadership, what we're talking about here are values. So leadership is values driven. It's about setting, not meeting targets. So you're not responding to other people's targets. You're starting to set your own about what's important to you. And it's about creating something new and something different, whether that's a new product or a new way of doing the job. And there's that issue of legacy again. And then finally, after full leadership, you have eldership. And that's where you pass on your knowledge, where you're supporting other people who are moving through those career stages. And the kind of roles people take on at this stage are things like mentors, NEDs, you might find them chairing or being on committees. And words associated with this level of career are things like tacit knowledge or wisdom. The mentoring, the potential for mentoring is different at each of those stages. So in the first stage, experimentation, you might be asking your mentor, what else could I do? In the experience accumulation level, you might be asking, where else could I get experience? In the full leadership level, you might be asking, how can I pass on my legacy? Or what is it that I want to pass on here? And in eldership, it's about what can I do to mentor others? How can I pass that knowledge on? So again, we're going to take a look at where each of you think you are in your own personal careers based on Hawkins' mentoring model.
Okay, here we go, another poll. A chance for you just a little bit of self-assessment, a little bit of reflection. You know how to do it? Where do you think you are? Of course, this is completely anonymous. We're not checking up on you. Right. Okay, I'm going to close that one. So there you are. You have just a very, very brief profile of your colleagues on this particular webinar. The vast majority of people are in that middle career block of people who are gathering information, gathering experience, and also already involved in taking on a more mature leadership role within organizations.
Okay. So that might, we just thought that that might give you some sense of how the mentoring might help you personally if you're going to be the individual who is actually working with the mentor. But now what we're also going to do is look at a very straightforward model about stages of SME development, because this mentoring process is about maximizing and fulfilling the potential of SMEs in the NDA estate supply chain. So growing SMEs on the basis of this model can be said to go through 3 stages. One, which is what we call the chaos stage. The second, which is what we call the stability or the stabilizing phase. And the third, which is the high performance stage. And again, the next 3 slides, we're just going to have a look at each of those 3 stages in a little bit more detail. And then we're going to have another poll, so you can think about where your organization might be in those 3 stages. So the chaos stage, this is often the stage where you have an owner-manager where there's been a big focus on growth, or there's been sudden growth spurt, and the owner-manager is dealing very often with a lot of that growth, and they may have pulled in some other people to support them in that process, but it tends to be on a bit of an ad hoc basis. So the sales are coming in, there's this initial rush of success, and the owner-manager finds himself working 17, 18 hours a day, 7 days a week. Because there's a constant process of firefighting and dealing with what's coming in, work and functions may not be delegated as well, or there may not be the people that are there that can be delegated to, and that's because there isn't the time to actually recruit people or develop functions. And what you tend to find in this stage is a reliance in the organization on certain key individuals rather than on a function or a role. And you can tell whether that's the case if you have somebody who, if they left the organization would fall apart. That's what we're talking about here. And at this stage as well, there isn't the plan as to how you might replace them, because there isn't the description of function or role or a process for recruiting. So it tends to be firefighting, a bit reactive, and generally exciting, but also potentially quite chaotic. And the next stage. Now, stability is assuming that you have not crashed and burned during the chaos stage, but you've moved through the chaos stage. You start to reach a stage of stability, and you realize what it is that you need, which is a bit more certainty around the processes and procedures and practices and who's responsible for what. And it's not individuals that you're relying on, but it's the different functions in the organization, and the owner-manager can take their foot off the accelerator a little bit, and they can let go and they can delegate to other people within the organization that may actually have knowledge or experience in areas that they don't have. So you're starting to put the processes in place that enable you to function at a more sustainable level. And that leads on to the 3rd stage, which is high performance. And once you're moving to the high performance stage, you're talking much more about values again. So this is a little bit like that leadership stage of individual. And sometimes it can be useful to think about the stages of SME development in terms of the stages of individual development as well. So this is where you're starting to develop the culture of an organisation, the values, there are the structures in place, but also the underlying principles and the underlying mission. And you're starting to innovate and do some research and development and explore other opportunities because you've got that solid, stable base to work from. And again, the mentoring will be different for organisations in each of those 3 different stages. So in stage 1, it's going to be how can we create some method out of this madness. In stage 2, it might be what are the processes and procedures we need in place and functions in place to make best use of the NDA estate. And in SME development, what's the legacy that I want to leave within the supply chain, or how do I get my values or culture across. And I'm going to hand you over to Tim again, because we're just going to have a little poll to see whereabouts you think you're in.
Here we go. So this is your opportunity to decide whether you are an experimenter in a chaotic organisation or whether you're a wise elder in a more high-performing, stable organisation. And of course, as Sarah was quite rightly saying, the mentoring needs are different in each of those cases. This gives you a chance to think a little bit about that. Okay, we have most of you voted now. Okay, I'll close it there and you can have a look. There's a fair amount of chaos out there. And again, just a chance to reflect a little bit on the kind of things you might be looking to in your mentor.
Okay. So what we were hoping to do with those 2 models was really to help you to reflect on where you are and where the organisation might be, and therefore what it might be helpful for you to approach your mentor with in terms of the key issues and how they might help you the most. So we'll move on now to part 3, which is about making the most of the mentoring, so making the most of this particular scheme. And I can talk from experience here because I was a mentee a couple of years ago. The first session is the most important session because it's the session that sets the direction for the rest of the mentoring relationship. But it's also the most difficult session I found because both mentor and mentee aren't really that sure about how this is going to work or what each can offer the other party. So what we suggest is that the focus of the first session is on those 4 issues. And Pippa's going to talk to you about, and I think Sam mentioned, that there is a preparatory form to fill in, which is a contracting form, which helps you to focus on these 4 issues and just gives a bit of structure to the first session so that it's not quite as sort of nebulous and airy-fairy as it may appear to be. The first session is best if it's face-to-face. Further sessions may be done by Skype or telephone, but it's best if you can start to build the relationship face-to-face. Okay, thanks, Tim. The method of getting the potential from the mentoring is the relationship and the kind of relationship that you build with your mentor. And it might be helpful for both of you, both mentor and mentee, to talk a little bit about why each of you have become involved in the process and a little bit of a discussion about your career to date. On the mentoring training, we'll be talking to them about their career stages and also about their business size and development, so you've got a common model or common vocabulary to talk about there. There's also your ambitions, what you see, your strengths, development areas, strategy, etc. So if you both share that information, then you might be able to see some links or some potential areas where you can support each other. And then the next part is to establish a clear contract or boundaries, and this is important because you may be talking at some point about your clients or their clients, and there could be issues of confidentiality. So you may not want to tell them about a particular product if they're working with another organisation who's one of your competitors. There may be a conflict of interest if you're, I don't know, both going for the same piece of work or whatever it might be. Agreements as to how you give each other feedback, whether or not, if the relationship doesn't seem to be working, how you might address that. Talking about just the very simple things like, do you have the time, or how much time do you have, how often are you going to meet, what kind of contact might you have between sessions, and if there are any sensitive or difficult issues, how you might address those. It's helpful just to consider those things up front so you don't get any nasty shocks further down the line. So in terms of the first session, we suggest that you prepare for it, and obviously agree a meeting time or venue, that you go through the introductions, you agree your expectations of the meetings, that you go through the form which provides you with structure, and then at the end of that you're looking for actions. So these are the goals that we were talking about. What are you going to do next? And then you summarise and you close positively. We're looking forward to the next session and with completing the actions that both sides have taken away. And I must say, in terms of my experience here, it's so individual, your relationship with the mentor and what benefits you may get from it. It can take a number of meetings before that becomes clear, and that's okay. It's not a short-term intervention. This is a longer-term intervention. There are, of course, things that might go wrong in the mentoring process. There may be unrealistic expectations. Sam was quite clear about what the mentoring is, but also what it's not. And if either party is going into the relationship with unrealistic expectations, then there may be some disappointments down the line. People are too busy, so business gets in the way, and it's important there to keep in contact and to let people know, because they may assume that you've lost interest when actually it's simply that you don't have the time to commit to it. Ongoing communication is really important to maintain and build that relationship, whether that's by telephone or email or whatever. And a bad fit with the mentor, that can be an issue which can be passed back to the NDA in certain circumstances. And of course, the mentor will not be able to give all the answers. Again, that relates back to what Sam said about what the relationship is not. There's some noise in the background. I'm not quite sure where that's from, actually.
Apologies.
Okay. So I'm going to hand over now to Pippa Kelly, who is from the NDA and is going to tell you what's going to happen next.
Right, well, welcome everybody. As you know, it's taken a little bit of time just to get everything up and running, and we do apologise for that. Your mentors will be having some training on Friday. Following that, I will be sending out an email to both you and to your mentor with each other's respective contact details. Although it does say here the mentor will be in touch, please don't wait for them. They're busy, you're busy. If you haven't heard from them, then please don't wait. Get on the phone or send them an email. It's Obviously, as Sarah said, it's worth preparing for the meeting. I know a couple of mentees have already said that they have some information they'd like to pass on to everybody beforehand. So if you've got a presentation about what your company does, where you come from, what your aims are, you're more than welcome to send that across to your mentor in advance. It may just help break the ice when you're first meeting. We will, during the process, be there for you if there's any issues. As Sarah said, occasionally you'll find that there's a conflict of interest, or you just find that you don't get on with your mentor. I hope you'd give it a good go. But if there are issues, then you need to get in touch with me and see whether we can't mediate, or alternatively, if for some reason, occasionally we've had people obviously leaving companies, moving on, then we'll see if we can find you another mentor. We will hopefully be doing some evaluation towards the end of the scheme. Probably within the first year we'll be in touch anyway, just to see how things are going. Regarding the ground rules form that was mentioned in your first meeting, we do like to collect these. It's not an exam, we're not going to test you on it, but it does mean that we know that you've had a productive first meeting. I don't expect to get lots of reports from you all regularly on how things are going, but I am sitting there blind, and if you've not managed to told me rather, I can't help you. We have in the past had a sort of mid-session meeting. We haven't decided what we'll be doing since the scheme's launched a little later in the year, but we will be in touch. And as I say, my email address is, well, you all know how to contact me through the supply chain email address. Please, I'm there for you. Pick up the phone, send me an email if you need any support. And here's a little bit more information on the next slide. We have got various pieces of information that are available on our website already for you to look at. If you look on the www.gov.uk, it's a difficult website to manage, and if you try searching for things, it is a little tricky. Try and find the NDA web page, and if you scroll down you'll find a procurement area. There is lots of information on there. We have details about the SME steering group meetings that we have. There are various booklets, including the one mentioned below, the frequently asked questions. That was produced in 2014 by one of our steering groups. There are some elements that are maybe a little out of date now, but most of it will still be very relevant. And if you have any questions, again, please contact myself or Sam. We'll be delighted to help you. Or if you're interested in the steering groups, please get in touch with the chairs of the local regional steering group. Next slide. Over to whoever's taking over on this bit.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks, Pippa. Just a chance now, we're coming to the end, so what we really appreciate is your a little bit of feedback about the session. We got 3 polls, so we'll do them fairly quickly. It's more for our information than for yours, so we won't spend a lot of time in analysing them. Here's the first one. This is all about whether or not you feel clear. Given all the information that Pippa and Sam and Sarah have given you, do you feel clear about the aims of the scheme? Okay, that's terrific. Thank you. That's good. That's very helpful. There you can see that we seem to have met our objective, our own objective, which is very useful. Thank you. In that case, what I'd like to do then is ask you the next question, which is about your sense of readiness, and what we're interested in here. And the question here is, are you clear about how the first session will run? Do you feel that you understand enough about it? Excellent. Oh, well, that's good. That's nice to see. Thank you very much. And finally, the last question we'd like to ask you is simply about this particular webinar itself. Did you feel that it was easy to follow? Did it flow well for you? Were you able to log in and access it? Have you been able to? Have you found it a useful experience? Terrific. Well, that's good news. Thank you very much. It would have been horrible to find out the opposite at this point of the process, but thank you. I'm now going to hand back to Sam, I think, or Pippa.
Yep, Sam here. Thank you very much, Tim, and Sarah and Pippa. And thank you for your feedback on the webinar. Hopefully we have given you the information that will help you on your scheme. As I said, Pippa will be sending out the emails hopefully next week to let you know whether or not we've managed to match you with a mentor. As I say, we try and match everyone, but I think we are a few short on mentors at the moment, so we have a few more coming in. So try and match as many of you as we can. If we can't, then we will come back to us, and hopefully we'll be holding other mentor schemes in the future as well. But really, I'd like to say thank you to all the presenters, and thank you for all of you mentees to take the time to come along and get a bit more of an insight on the scheme and how it can help you and how you can get up a successful first meeting with your mentor. Okay, so I think we're probably going to close it there.